Hi, fourth grade. Today is Haiku. It's Monday, April 27th, and we are going to talk about the history of haiku briefly and what it means to be a haiku, to write a haiku. Um, so we'll look at some examples and then we'll look at tanka on Wednesday. And I know you guys have, uh, I believe you went over haiku last year with Miss Stair. We're going to do a little review, a little history. It's a 17 syllable poem total. So the 3 lines have 17 syllables, and it's unrhymed. The first is 5, the second line has 7, the third line has 5. So 575 is how we count it in English. Um, and when we look at the Japanese translations, they are, you'll notice that they don't have the same amount of syllables because they're counted a little differently because of the way the language is. And they use a different way of counting rather than syllable. I believe it's called onri. And so the number is not the same as far as syllables go. But we'll look at Basho and Issa. But this comes from the 7th century. This is a very old form, and it's supposed to use simple images, simple words and images to describe scenes in nature. A lot of times it has to do specifically with the season, like to make sure, when we hear certain keywords, we're supposed to go, oh, they're talking springtime, or oh, they're talking about winter. But to be a haiku, it has to be nature based. Now, there are lots of haikus that are just written in 575 and are not nature based. But for what we're going to do, we are going to do them nature based today. So like I said, the modern English haiku, 3 lines of 575. So, and we know how to do the syllables as far as like that's how we clap when we hear the syllables, and that way we know. Or you can do it as your mouth moves. I think Miss Stair, I found that out from Lillian that she did that, and I didn't really think about that before. But as your mouth moves, you can count the number of syllables. So the first one here, example from Japanese, from Basho. Um, the old frog, sorry, it's early, not speaking well. The old pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of the water. So, I mean, we've got a very basic scene. Something about us and frogs and toads this quarter. But that's what we're looking at. And it just has a certain simplicity that talks about that's just a nature scene. And then we also have Richard Wright, who was more as a modern American person. As you can see, he lived in the 20th century. From across the lake, past the black winter trees, faint sounds of a flute. Um, so we get the season in that as well. We know that it is a stark scene because of the trees. And these have a very sensory and oh, I don't know why that one was hidden. That's funny. We're really talking about the senses here. We're talking about imagery. And this one is kind of funny. And a lot of times some of the Japanese ones are funny. It's a mosquito at my ear. Does he think I'm deaf? That's all it is, which is kind of cute. I like it. It's kind of funny. So the difference in the two poems, if you notice that those two, the first and the third, are translated from Japanese. They do not hold true to the 575 rule because they are translations. They measure their poems differently than we do, but we are counting syllables to make our haiku. So when you are doing a haiku, this is what you're going to need. It needs to be nature based. It doesn't necessarily have to talk about the season. It can be a little snapshot of nature, but I want it to be nature-based. It needs to be an observation of the world. Um, just like the first one is the frog jumping in the pond. Just it's a little witness. I'm witnessing this thing happening in the world. We've talked several times this year about showing and not telling. Um, so what we're going to do is we're going to choose words that give us imagery or observations or actions that are happening instead of going, like he felt bad, he went to the mailbox, he did da, da, da. Like we don't need the laundry list of things. We don't need you telling us every step of the way. We need you showing us with something um potent, some kind of like strong way of communicating. And then it's going to be a snapshot of the world. I talked about that. One of the things that I thought that maybe you could do when you're writing your haiku is go outside and literally do this to a scene. Or like you could even make a a frame, but you don't have to do all that. But go outside and do this and look around to a tiny section of your back or front yard where you are, looking at a specific thing. And then if you see a downed log, like a tree that's laying there, and there are ants on it, you could write the poem about seeing the ants on the tree in the springtime, and that could be your poem. And all you have to do is put it in the 575 form. That is basically what I'm looking for. That's what haiku is. And it's also a way to pause and get everything small and take a second to go, what is interesting about this particular snapshot of my life or this view from my window? And that's another way you could do it too, is look out your window and what do you see when you're looking right out the window? Do you see the neighbor's yard? Do you see a bird flying from a tree? Do you see something sitting on the power line? I mean, you could, you know, take a second to look at um, something happening and turn it into a poem. I mean, it can be small. It's supposed to be small. It's not supposed to be like the man got down on one knee, begged her to marry him. She said yes. Like we're not looking for giant moments in time of something that's happened. We're looking at the minute. So, like I said before, five for the first five syllables for the first line, 7 syllables for the second line, 5 syllables for the third line. Okay, 575. Oop, go back. We need Sonia Sanchez. Okay, so this is one by a modern writer as well, like Richard Wright, and I like this poem. I think this is nice. I count the morning stars, the air so sweet, I turn river dark with sound. I like that. Um, I like the river dark putting, that word put together, um, and I like the way the poem feels a little bit rushed with the way that she wrote it. I like this poem. I think it's got that imagery that we are looking for, but it's also like what is happening in this poem? She's counting the morning stars, and it's a new day. The air is sweet, and she's turning river dark with sound. And I mean, I don't know what that means, but it sounds lovely. Um, and it's one of those things where we've got a tiny moment that it feels like the beginning of the universe just because of the way that she's describing it, right? So that's what you're gonna do, and it's gonna be fantastic. Um, so another poem from Japanese, the Japanese language. Over the wintry forest, winds howl in rage with no leaves to blow, which is that's a crazy image to me because you think about in the winter when the winds are blowing really hard and you think about there being these leaves that can skitter around, but there's nothing there. And so it's making the wind angry. There's nothing there for him to blow. So it's got this nice, it's got some nice I am not finding my words this morning. I'm sorry. Um personification because the wind is howling in rage. Um And, once again, we know that it's winter, you know? And you don't have to say the word winter, summer, spring, or fall in order for it to talk about the season, okay? Talking about something blossoming, you know that it's gonna be spring. Talking about something being without leaves, you know it's gonna be either fall or winter, or leaves falling, you know that it's gonna be fall. Being super hot, it's gonna be summer. You can use keywords instead of just saying these particular 4 words to describe the season. And one of the things, if you noticed, we just got through talking about, imagism, where, we looked at pounds and in the metro at the station, and we and moon and all of those poems. Um, They that particular style of poetry was inspired by haiku. So, this is almost like a step backwards from, this in lineage as far as it goes. Like, this brand of poetry gave birth to imagism because they were interested in using snapshots. They were interested in using particular, um, you know, the small form, the image had to be the center of attention, and that's what it is in haiku. So if you look at it, they're not very far. So your homework that will be due like on the following Monday. I want you to write 2 haiku poems, okay? I want it to reference the nature and the seasons. I want you to do your best to make it 575. And so you can clap to measure syllables, and I can even scoot back and do that with the others to see if it makes sense. And I said use the picture frame method if you're having trouble figuring out what to do. And I know that it can be hard, like just saying to go write a poem. Sometimes you're like, oh, what do I do? Use this, go outside and put something in a frame. Be like, this is going to be my section that I'm looking at, and I'm going to talk about that. Um, and make sure you're using the 5 senses. Go through and say, like, do I smell something? Do I hear something? Do I see something? And use that and translate it into vivid language. Okay. Um, and I've got a little worksheet that's going to be on here that could help you go through this that you don't have to do. It's just there to help you. It's kind of a step-by-step process about writing haiku. But once you've written something and maybe you have too many syllables, think about how you can parse it down. Think about is this article, is this thing necessary? And you can kind of scoop it out or use a different word to give it that um, the same feeling as a haiku. And if you're looking for different words, remember thesaurus.com is a fantastic resource. And if one word doesn't fit, you can look for another word and it can either make it longer or smaller by finding the right word at thesaurus.com. The dictionary and the thesaurus are really unbelievably valuable when you're doing poetry. You just have to, you know, have it nearby. And you don't have to have a physical one. You can use the ones online. Doesn't matter. Um, and I'm going to put some extra resources here. I'm going to give you guys some extra poems to read if you're interested in doing this. I've tried to reduce the workload because I think, it's we are in unprecedented um, times right now. We've talked about that. Um, I think that people are doing the best that they can, and I'm trying to make this easy on you while still giving you something to learn about poetry. I want you to still get something out of this without feeling completely stressed out. So I've reduced the workload and the amount of things that you need to turn into me. That being said, I have some students that are really interested in this material, um, and will have some extra stuff for you to do. And also, if you just want to get the most out of it, you can do this extra stuff and you don't have to turn it into me, or you still can. It doesn't matter. I will take it. And it'll help you learn what about this. It'll just give you extra practice. Um, and I just want you to get the best out of this that you can without feeling completely stressed out. Because I get it. Everybody's situation is different. And it is a wild, wild world out there right now. We don't know what's going on. So, but I love doing this poetry with you guys. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea. Um, but, it is my cup of tea, so, I get a little zealous about it. So, I hope everyone had a great weekend, and if you have any questions at all, please contact me. I will be here. Alright? See you guys later. It won't turn off.